The Boeing 737 was 31,000 ft above the Texas Panhandle when the first F-35 Lightning II appeared off the port wing. Rebecca Walsh barely glanced up from her tablet, even as the other passengers pressed their faces against the windows, phones out, recording what they assumed was just another military training exercise. She'd seen fighter jets before. What she hadn't expected was for the lead pilot to request her call sign over the aircraft's intercom system 18 minutes later. Rebecca had specifically chosen seat 15C for 3 reasons. It was over the wing where turbulence felt less pronounced. It was far enough from the bathrooms to avoid foot traffic, and most importantly, it offered her a clear view of the sky without having to crane her neck around other passengers. At 34, she'd learned to appreciate the small comforts that made cross-country flights bearable during her frequent travels between consulting opportunities. If you believe no woman should be underestimated because of how she looks, type respect below and let us know where you're watching from. The morning had started like any other Thursday. Her alarm went off at 5:15 a.m. in her modest apartment in Dallas, Texas. She'd packed light, just a carry-on with enough clothes for 4 days in Massachusetts. The purpose of her trip was straightforward: a consulting interview with Meridian Dynamics, an aerospace firm outside Boston. After 14 months of unemployment following the downsizing of the defense contractor, where she'd worked as a systems integration specialist, Rebecca needed this opportunity. She'd dressed professionally: charcoal slacks, a burgundy blazer, and comfortable flats. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail. To any casual observer boarding Flight 2156, she looked like countless other young professional women traveling for business. What they couldn't see was the weight of the military academy ring she kept carefully concealed beneath her blazer sleeve, or the way her fingers moved across her tablet with the precision of someone trained to operate million-dollar flight systems. As she settled into 15C, Rebecca's eyes automatically cataloged the emergency exits and assessed potential threats, habits so deeply ingrained they required no conscious thought. The tablet displayed what appeared to be standard consulting documents, but the security protocols it employed were far from civilian grade. When the F-35 Lightning II first appeared off the port wing, Rebecca's reaction was telling. While other passengers gasped and pointed, she continued her work with the calm efficiency of someone who'd spent years around advanced military aircraft. The encrypted notification that buzzed on her phone went unnoticed by everyone except the teenage aviation enthusiast in 14D, who noticed the distinct military-grade vibration pattern. "Look at that!" exclaimed Mike Patterson, a middle-aged businessman in 15D pressing against the window. "Must be some kind of training exercise. Pretty cool, right?" He glanced at Rebecca expectantly, but she merely nodded politely. Patterson's tone carried the casual condescension that many men automatically employed when addressing attractive young women in professional settings. "You probably don't know much about military aircraft, but those are F-35s, newest fighter jets in the world." Rebecca looked up from her tablet, meeting his gaze with calm professionalism. "They're impressive aircraft," she said simply, then returned to her work. What she didn't mention was that she'd helped test the avionics integration systems that made those F-35s the most advanced multi-role fighters ever built. Flight attendant Jennifer Martinez noticed something unusual about the woman in 15C during the safety demonstration. While most passengers ignored the presentation, Rebecca followed every gesture with focused intensity. Like someone who understood that emergency procedures weren't theoretical possibilities, but operational realities. Jennifer had been flying for 8 years and had developed an eye for passengers who carried themselves differently. Military personnel, even in civilian clothes, maintained an unmistakable bearing. But Rebecca's age threw off the usual patterns. At 34, she seemed too young to be a senior officer, yet too composed to be junior enlisted. The truth about Rebecca Walsh was more complex than anyone on Flight 2156 could have guessed. 12 years earlier, she'd graduated 3rd in her class from the Air Force Academy, earning a degree in aeronautical engineering and a commission as a 2nd lieutenant. Her exceptional performance in flight training had fast-tracked her into the F-35 test pilot program. Her specialization had been avionics integration, ensuring that all of the F-35's sophisticated electronic systems worked together flawlessly under extreme conditions. She'd logged over 800 hours in various F-35 variants, including classified test flights that validated the aircraft's sensor fusion capabilities and electronic warfare systems. The consulting interview in Boston wasn't just another job opportunity. Meridian Dynamics had specifically requested her expertise for a classified project involving next-generation fighter avionics. What they didn't know was that she'd already helped design many of the systems they were trying to reverse engineer. Her unemployment wasn't due to lack of competence. Defense contractors constantly sought experienced test pilots with her background. The problem was security clearances. After leaving active duty to care for her ailing father, Rebecca had let her clearances lapse. Reactivating them required extensive background investigations that could take months. Captain Reynolds's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude of 37,000 feet. You're free to move about the cabin." Rebecca glanced out the window again. The F-35s were maintaining perfect formation, their pilots demonstrating precision that required thousands of hours of training. She found herself automatically analyzing their flight characteristics, noting the subtle adjustments they made to compensate for different aircraft performance. "Those pilots are good," she murmured. Mike Patterson overheard and chuckled condescendingly. "Pretty girls always think military guys are impressive. It's all about the uniform, right?" "Actually," Rebecca said calmly, "I was referring to their formation flying technique. Maintaining precise spacing with different aircraft types requires exceptional skill." Patterson laughed, the sound carrying masculine superiority. "Oh, you know about formation flying now? Let me guess. You've seen Top Gun a few times?" Several passengers turned to listen, sensing potential entertainment. Jennifer Martinez paused her beverage service, recognizing the tone of a conversation about to become uncomfortable. She'd witnessed this scenario countless times, successful, attractive women being patronized by men who assumed youth and beauty precluded technical competence. "I understand it's complex," Rebecca replied, maintaining perfect professional neutrality. "Multiple aircraft with different performance characteristics, varying weight distributions, constantly changing atmospheric conditions." "Sure, sweetheart," Patterson continued, his condescension becoming more pronounced. "But real military aviation is about more than pretty formations. These guys are trained for combat. They make split-second decisions under pressure that would terrify most people." The teenage aviation enthusiast in 14D, Tommy Chen, felt uncomfortable. He'd been studying military aircraft for years and recognized that Rebecca's comments demonstrated genuine technical knowledge. Her terminology was precise, her understanding accurate. "The F-35's sensor fusion system must be working overtime right now," Rebecca observed. "Coordinating formation flight with a civilian aircraft while maintaining full situational awareness requires processing data from multiple sources simultaneously." Patterson's expression shifted to barely concealed annoyance. "Listen, honey, sensor fusion isn't something you understand from Wikipedia. These are billion-dollar military systems designed by the smartest engineers in the world. The pilots flying those jets went through years of training that would wash out 99% of people." "I'm sure they did," Rebecca said quietly, returning to her tablet. The weight of her concealed academy ring seemed heavier now, but Patterson wasn't finished. Alcohol and attention had emboldened him. "Military aviation represents the pinnacle of technology. Stealth capabilities, advanced radar systems, electronic warfare packages, it's not something civilians can really appreciate, especially not—" He gestured vaguely in Rebecca's direction. "Especially not what?" The question came from retired Marine Colonel James Harrison in 16C, whose tone carried decades of military authority. What Patterson couldn't see were the memories his words triggered in Rebecca's mind. The flight over Syria in 2019, when her F-35C had taken shrapnel from a surface-to-air missile that detonated close enough to crack her canopy and send metal fragments into her right temple. She'd been testing new electronic warfare countermeasures in a real combat environment, validating systems that would protect hundreds of future pilots. With blood streaming down her face and alarms filling her cockpit, She'd maintained formation while successfully completing the test protocol that proved F-35 defensive systems could operate under battle damage. The titanium rod in her forearm wasn't from a training accident. It was from the emergency landing at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, where she'd brought her damaged aircraft home despite partial hydraulic failure and compromised flight controls. The Air Force had awarded her the Distinguished Flying Cross for that mission, though the citation remained classified. Rebecca remembered the weeks of physical therapy, learning to write again, while bones healed around titanium reinforcement. She remembered the longer psychological recovery, working through trauma of nearly ejecting over hostile territory. Most clearly, she remembered when the flight surgeon cleared her to return to full duty, pronouncing her physically and mentally capable of continuing as one of the Air Force's most experienced F-35 test pilots. She'd been 29 years old, with more combat flight hours in the Lightning II than pilots with twice her experience. The decision to leave active duty hadn't been about fear or inability to continue flying. Her father's diagnosis with early-onset Alzheimer's had presented an impossible choice: continue the career she loved or return home to care for the man who'd raised her as a single parent. She'd chosen family over career, submitting her resignation with full support of commanding officers who understood that some obligations transcended professional duty. The Air Force had offered non-flying assignments near home, but Rebecca knew staying in uniform without flight duty would be more painful than leaving entirely. The transition to civilian life had been more difficult than anticipated. Defense contractors eagerly sought her expertise, but couldn't offer meaningful work without active security clearances. Aviation companies valued her experience but didn't fully understand the depth of her technical knowledge. Her father had passed away 8 months earlier, his condition deteriorating rapidly. Rebecca had been with him at the end, holding his hand as he slipped away peacefully. His final words had been a confused question about when she was returning to flying those fast planes. Colonel Harrison had noticed something that escaped other passengers' attention. When the F-35s first appeared, Rebecca's reaction hadn't been civilian amazement. Her glance had been appraising, professional, evaluating formation technique and aircraft configuration rather than being impressed by spectacle. More telling was her body language during Patterson's lecture. Instead of becoming defensive, she'd maintained controlled composure that military training instilled. Her responses were measured, technically accurate, delivered without emotional reaction, exactly the discipline that characterized experienced military personnel under pressure. Tommy Chen had also picked up on subtle indicators. Rebecca's technical vocabulary was too precise for casual knowledge. When she'd mentioned sensor fusion systems, she'd used terminology matching official F-35 documentation rather than popular media descriptions. Jennifer Martinez observed different details during service rounds. Rebecca's interaction with meal service demonstrated efficiency that came from years of eating under time constraints. She consumed food methodically while working, a habit developed by people whose schedules didn't allow leisure dining. The way Rebecca organized her space around 15C revealed additional military habits. Her carry-on was positioned for immediate access. Her tablet was secured with a lanyard, preventing it from becoming a projectile during turbulence. Personal items were arranged with systematic organization, characteristic of people trained to operate where misplaced equipment could have serious consequences. When the aircraft encountered mild turbulence over Arkansas, Rebecca's reaction was particularly revealing. While other passengers gripped armrests or expressed concern, she continued working without interruption. Her body automatically adjusted to aircraft movement with fluid compensation of someone who'd spent years in military aircraft where turbulence was routine. Patterson, increasingly frustrated by Rebecca's calm competence, decided to escalate his assertions. The thing about fighter pilots is that they're a different breed entirely. The training, physical demands, mental pressure, it's not something everyone can handle, especially women. The comment drew sharp looks from several passengers, including Colonel Harrison, who'd served with numerous female pilots. Jennifer Martinez paused service again, recognizing Patterson was crossing lines requiring crew intervention. "I mean, no offense to the ladies," Patterson continued, but there are biological differences that make certain jobs more suitable for men. Military aviation is about upper body strength, spatial reasoning, handling G-forces, things that favor male physiology. Rebecca looked up, meeting Patterson's gaze with steady eye contact that made him slightly uncomfortable. The F-35 has fly-by-wire controls that minimize physical strength requirements. Most demands are cognitive rather than physical. Right, but cognitive demands like spatial reasoning, multitasking under pressure, situational awareness, those are areas where men typically excel, Patterson replied, his tone suggesting he was patiently explaining obvious facts. Tommy Chen couldn't remain silent. Actually, sir, the Air Force has had female fighter pilots since 1993. Some of the top F-35 pilots are women. Patterson waved dismissively. I'm sure there are exceptions, kid, but we're talking about the norm. The vast majority of military pilots are men because that's what the job requires. Colonel Harrison decided intervention was necessary. Rising with deliberate movement of someone accustomed to command presence, he addressed Patterson directly. Son, I served with female pilots for 15 years. Some of the best aviators I knew were women. Your assumptions about capability based on gender are not only incorrect, they're insulting. The intervention shifted conversation dynamics entirely. Patterson, suddenly faced with actual military authority, began backtracking while trying to maintain position. I didn't mean to offend anyone, Colonel. I'm just saying there are statistical differences in capabilities between men and women that affect job performance in high-stress situations. And I'm telling you that your statistics are wrong. Harrison replied firmly. I've seen female pilots perform under conditions that would break most people, male or female. Combat doesn't care about your preconceptions. Jennifer Martinez decided crew intervention was necessary. Gentlemen, ladies, I need to ask that we keep conversations civil and respectful. If there are concerns, I can help relocate seating. Rebecca continued working throughout the exchange, but her fingers had stilled on the screen. The encrypted phone in her blazer buzzed again, this time with a pattern indicating urgent, secure communication. She glanced at the Pentagon area code but made no move to answer. Patterson, emboldened by what he perceived as Rebecca's continued silence, made one final assertion. Look, I respect military service, and I'm sure there are capable female pilots. But when it comes to the absolute elite, test pilots, combat leaders, people making life-or-death decisions for others, that's still primarily a male domain. It's not sexism, it's just reality. The statement hung in the air like a challenge, sensing Patterson had crossed an uncrossable line. The encrypted phone in Rebecca's blazer buzzed with the insistent pattern indicating emergency communication requiring immediate response. She retrieved the device, noting that several passengers observed military-grade security features clearly visible on the screen. The caller ID showed Luke AFB OPS, with a priority classification Rebecca recognized immediately. Luke Air Force Base was home to the 56th Fighter Wing, the primary F-35 training unit. Excuse me, Rebecca said to nearby passengers, then pressed the secure connection. This is Viper. The effect of those 3 words was immediate and electric. Colonel Harrison's head snapped up, eyes widening with recognition. Tommy Chen gasped audibly. Jennifer Martinez dropped her plastic cup. Even Patterson sensed something significant had occurred. Viper, this is Luke Operations, came the voice through the speaker, clearly audible to everyone within 3 rows. We have an F-35 emergency inbound to Boston Logan with hydraulic failure and partial avionics malfunction. The pilot is requesting immediate consultation with the only test pilot within range who has experience with this specific failure mode. Rebecca's demeanor transformed instantly from civilian passenger to military professional. Her posture straightened, her voice took on crisp precision of official communications, and her entire presence radiated authority that couldn't be faked. Copy, Luke Operations. What's the aircraft configuration and pilot status? Single-seat F-35A, pilot is Captain Sarah Mitchell, tail number 155124. She's approximately 40 minutes from Boston Logan with degraded flight controls and intermittent display failures. The failure matches the profile from test incident November 2019. Rebecca's expression tightened. She knew exactly which incident they referenced. Her own emergency landing after the Syria mission, when she'd brought home an F-35 with remarkably similar system failures. Understood. Patch me through to Captain Mitchell immediately. While Luke Operations established the link, Rebecca addressed the stunned passengers. I apologize for the interruption, but this is a genuine emergency. I need to help guide a fellow pilot through a potentially dangerous landing. Patterson's face had gone pale as he comprehended the magnitude of his miscalculations. The young woman he'd been lecturing about women's inability to handle military aviation was apparently not only a pilot herself, but one senior enough to be consulted during in-flight emergencies. "Viper, this is Raptor 23, came a strained voice. "I've got multiple amber warnings, hydraulic pressure dropping, and my primary flight display is cycling. The aircraft is controllable, but response is getting sluggish." Rebecca's voice took on the calm, authoritative tone of experienced test pilots dealing with critical situations. "Thank you to everyone who typed respect. Your support honors every female service member who has served with dignity like Rebecca Walsh. These stories of courage and competence need to be told. If you believe in sharing tales of incredible women veterans, please subscribe to help us honor more amazing service members. Until next time, remember that true dignity can never be defeated.